Hello and welcome to Quizzitok, Quizzitok, where we meet people and encounter minds that make you think. Trailblazers, authors, educators, you name it. Real stories, powerful insights, life lessons, and more. Expect to be surprised, challenged, and maybe even changed. Today we have with us a very interesting guest with a big quiz connect. Someone who's synonymous with sports administration, quizzing, and media in India. He's a man who wears many hats. He's pioneered India's first fantasy sports game, has been team director with an IPL team that won the trophy twice while he was there, was project director of the biggest ever football World Cup for under 17s ever held. It happened in India. He's led Indian volleyball to new heights and is an active quizzer and popular quizmaster, writing quiz columns and hosting quizzes that have challenged and entertained people for years. Please join me in welcoming Joy Bhattacharjya.
Hey Babu, thank you so much for inviting me here. Lovely to be here. Of course, I call him Babu because I know him for 3 decades and he's always been Babu to us.
We first met on Quiz Time 88. Do you recall that?
Absolutely. I remember that. That was probably the most important occasion of my life. And the first time that I actually had a blazer sewn for, wearing it.
Really?
And I remember we shot it in March 1988. I think the studios were in Hauskas.
Right next to the deer park,
Yes.
in the dome.
And I remember it vividly. I remember each and every answer that we got. I remember the answers we missed. And it was a life-changing experience. And
You're from Jadavpur University.
I came from Jadavpur University. We won our first round. And then in the East Zone finals, we just answered a lot of wrong answers. We answered the most correct answers, the most wrong answers. And I think we ended up in third place. I think IIM Calcutta went through.
That's right. Finally, I'm trying to recall who won that particular year. Oh, it was a team from Mumbai.
Poddar
R.A.
Bruce.
Poddar.
In fact,
Ruchi Anandan.
He's still a good friend. I met him recently. He's still a good friend.
It was quite awesome. You said you remember some of the worst and best questions. Any recollection?
Absolutely. I remember one particular one where you showed the red panda. And for some reason, I called it the Himalayan raccoon. And I was cursing myself. I mean, how could I miss? Because there's only one panda in India, the lesser panda or the red panda. And I think you would have given it in any of those. And
I would have. In the Eastern Himalayas, that's
Yeah.
the one species that we have.
And the one I remember getting, which I was really proud of, was there's a song called NG by the Rolling Stones. And you played the start, and that start could have been 3-4 other songs. I hit early, and then I said, no, this is the Rolling Stones, and I was very happy about that.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So that was beautiful. I remember you made quite an impression at that time, and you did well. How did you get into quizzing in the first place?
So it's one of those things, we used to live in Greenview, is 14-storied building. So one of the
In
things in Kolkata. So one of the things that used to get organized very regularly were quizzes, and all the fathers would sort of conduct rounds and all.
In the building itself?
In the building itself, especially during the pujas. That was one of the things. So you have a play, you have some Nityanatya performed, and then of course you have a quiz.
Actually, this is one interesting part about Durga Puja. I even learned recently here in Chittarajan Park in Bhelpuri, there's a regular program in quizzes, and you were coming, despite being a quiz master and all over the country, you were traveling all the way from Gurgaon to take part in Durga Puja quizzes.
Not just to take part, not even, there's one quiz where I didn't even qualify, and which was, quite a thing. But that's what quizzing is all about. And that's the beauty of quizzing. It's a democracy. So once you go out there, it doesn't matter how many columns you have written, how good you are. If in those 25 questions you don't know the right answers, you may not qualify. But that is what makes quizzing so very special, because you prove yourself every time that you're sitting. And there's a fun to it. I mean, why does one do it? You do it because you get an adrenaline shot out of quizzing. You get, you feel that thing, when you get an answer. And even in quizzings where you don't do particularly well, there'll always be one or two answers that you give that you work out and you say, wow, this was so much fun, because I managed to work it out.
Absolutely. And also that goes whether you do it individually as part of a team. I think that's what makes the difference. The sporting attitude is very important and participation is key. That you take part, whether you win or lose, you engage in it. as a sport, I've never been a quizzer. So, and I've been upfront about that from the very first quiz that I hosted, that I've always come into it as a quiz master, as a conductor and an editor and curator, and, all about that. Because Joy also, after that outing on Quiz Time 88, when we met, the next time we met was when he joined our team on one of the toughest quizzes in the world, Mastermind, and he was head of content. Before that, I want to come back to the Pada and the building, Greenview you called it,
Yeah.
and the quizzes that you had over there. So who were the ones who were better at it? How do you figure out, are good readers make good quizzes? How do you form teams out of interest? Yeah.
So there's just one word that defines all quizzes, because there are very different types of quizzes. So I'll give you an example. There was a quizzer with me called Joydeep, who was good normally, but he was brilliant visually. Absolutely brilliant visually.
Joydeep Mukherjee, man.
Joydeep Mukherjee.
Who was also part of our team.
Who was also part of your team. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. He could see a face and recognize it anyway. I am face blind. Okay. So when we used to sit together, you will not believe it. Again, it's an example of teamwork. So there's a particular, they'll show, okay, this is a clip. He's going to try and identify the faces. I'll be looking, okay, that board is there. That's written in a language that's not English. This is not there. Look at the footage. That's mid-1980s. This is probably from the 1980s. So when we sat together, even for a visual, I am trying to fill in the background and things I know. He's focusing on the face. And that's it. Quizzers are curious, and good quizzers can get together, and and that is where the real magic is. Where you'll say, okay, that's 80s. That's this. This is probably in East Europe. And you say, okay, that's so and so. And that makes it so much fun. That is the real pleasure you get out of quizzing.
So collaboration can be very constructive, and cumulatively it can build what you know and figure it out. And that's how you form teams. Sometimes, some teams are formed and who does best on the basis of marks individually and put them together. But if there's no chemistry,
You're
like you were saying,
absolutely right. We call them there's a term in for quizzers, the hardcore quizzes. It's called Khuni teams. Where
what teams?
Khuni, murderer teams, because they murder each other's answers. Somebody thinks he knows better, he'll cut him. And good teams basically
Are non-Khuni teams.
non-Khuni teams, and they'll turn on and tell you, what do you think? I'm not sure. This is my guess. What do you think? So they'll write down, they'll look at each other, they'll say, okay, this is it. Then what you do is you start watching the quizmaster's reaction when he hears the other answers. Okay. He seems
body language.
Yeah, he seems to be interested in that one. Okay, there's somebody there. Where look at these names. You start eliminating names. So it is a game, and I wish I could tell people that if this is question, this is an answer. There is so much more in between. It's about engaging it. It's about looking at body language. It's about intelligent guessing. It's about teamwork, and that's what makes quizzing so much fun. Still, it's so much fun that I still, as I said, right now we'll go out and sit in a quiz, in an open quiz in the middle of nowhere for no prize money in probably a disused classroom, just for the fun of it.
Which is all to do with the game of it, the support of it.
Yeah.
But you have to have a grounding of knowledge.
Yeah.
So we'll come back to that and how you build it. We talked about teamwork and how, it can be very, very collaborative and interactive, and it can build in that way. And the usefulness of that. You did a show called University Challenge, which had teams of 4. My God, that it had to be, quicksilver reflexes and, talking to each other. But let's move to the next quiz that I saw you on, which was Mastermind, which was for solo people, isolated on the black chair under a spotlight. And there it's not only mastery, but the speed of reflex of response that you have to get it. And when we set it, do you recall what the challenges were at that time? Because I don't think that was the norm at all. Those kind of
No,
at that time.
And it was very tough. I think the toughest part about Mastermind was you have 2 sets, and it's about getting the sets to be even to each other, because subject experts are subject experts, but within that, can you get some amount of evenness? And you can't even have a pattern which is very easy, because then it will give the other 3 people too much of a chance. So you have to mix it up, but you have to do it. And the biggest challenge I had, where I remember, was we had one person taking, say, the 1971 war, the other person taking, say, the life and works of Gerald Darrell. And I think that was the Mastermind finals, and Devanshu and I think Doita Datta. And the problem was, how do you make the 71 war questions around the same length as those of Gerald Darrell, which are much easier to phrase?
So you have a level playing field.
So you have to try and have a level playing field, and those are the.
But it has to do with the choice of subject too.
It has to.
Some people sometimes pick subjects which are
hugely
an
district.
author and a series of books is much easier to handle. It is challenging and it is, you have to master it, but it's much simpler than something which is very widespread. I remember one individual and one of the other masterminds picked the coinage of India, and we tried to counsel and say that, look, it's a big subject. It's a course in the master's degree for history, and it spans thousands of years. So, I mean, you're really asking for it.
Yeah, absolutely. One of our best quizzers, he appeared, in fact, on the first mastermind as well, Movin Miranda. And he chose the Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. And I said, I would never have chosen that. And he's such a quiz lover. He turned around and said, no, but I so enjoyed reading the book again, William Shirer, so I did it. But, that's where, but perhaps he could have probably chosen a smaller topic which would have given him more advantage.
What subjects we chose? I remember opening gambits in a game of chess was one specialized subject. Eponyms was something that Movin had chosen for one of the other rounds.
Yeah,
it was a preliminary, maybe, or whatever it is. And there was such a variety of subjects. That was the delight of the subject, but also a challenge.
Huge challenge.
And because there is a certain creativity in creating a quiz question. It has to be exact. It has to be precise. It has to be the right length. It has to lead to a unique answer. It has to have the right amount of clues, in a sense that, guide you in one direction towards a unique answer. But also importantly, there's a creativity to it. There's a science to it and there's an art to it. How do you set a question? From having done that, and that's the time from which I started an expression I used for our guest here, which is the joy of quizzing. This is something he's enjoyed, and he brings in a certain creativity. What some people call the ras, to use Indian aesthetics terminology, that, usme ras honi chahiye, sawal mein. You can have a dry as dust factual question, but also there can be a little thing. What are some of those things you think make an interesting question?
So it's a way you look at it. So quizzing is also like a little bit of, a good question can also be a little bit like magic. Some of it is misdirection. So what is a simple example of misdirection? You turn around and say that, what, no matter how hungry they are, polar bears rarely eat penguins. And you look at it and you wonder why. And all sorts of answers come up. They're 16,000 kilometers apart. They're in, one from the north.
Unless you're in a zoo and you're feeding it, you don't want a plate.
Exactly. Or you turn around and say that, which is the, the most populated Indian city north of Mount Everest. Okay.
Yeah.
And the truth is that Delhi is north of Mount Everest. So we never look at it that way.
It's barely 1 degree north of the line of latitude that passes through Delhi south, actually.
Yeah.
Everest is just a little further south. Yeah. This is an obvious one.
But people look at it and say, no, Chandigarh or Jammu and Kashmir, okay, must be Srinagar. But that's what I'm saying, that one is misdirection. The other is to take a fact, but to put it in a particular way which is very, very different. So recently I asked a question in a Kolkata quiz where I turned around and I said that, in the 80s in Calcutta, there was a great furor in the 70s and 80s because a particular place name was changed from that of a captain of artillery and a Victoria Cross holder to a former chef who was there in the Paris Peace Mission of 1919. So people were wondering, what is this and why should this place name be? All misdirection. This is Harrington Street in Kolkata. Became Ho Chi Minh ceremony because the American embassy was there.
Ho Chi Minh Sharoni.
Ho Chi Minh Sharoni. So the United States of American embassy was there. So they wanted to make a point. So the road before it was called
the Marxist government of the time.
So they changed it to Ho Chi Minh ceremony.
Yeah, I remember. Yes, absolutely. You were a 4G kid, an army officer's son, right? So you must have grown up all over the country. The early influences at home and at school have a shaping role in the interest of children. What do you think helped you get interested in all kinds of things? What is just native aptitude?
No. I think it's just purely a function, of the number of books in your house and how everyone else around you reads. My father was a voracious reader. My mother was a voracious reader. In fact, she had a lending library, I remember, in Delhi, when we were here for a while, where every day the guy would come in the afternoon and give her a book. She'd read it, and the next day, the next guy, every day she'd read a book. And my father was the same. Whenever he had time, he'd just read. And, in his younger days, he'd walk 10, 15 kilometers to reach a camp where there were American GIs and there were magazines out there and he could just go and read them. So that's the culture. So I think the most important gift you can give children is books in the house. In fact,
and the habit of reading, because now you can read off, Kindle, you can read off
everything.
you can read- But all of that reading and in-depth reading, long-form reading, I think that is terribly important. At that time, we never had any of all this. You're much younger.
Yeah.
But even then, books were the main thing.
Exactly. And not only books, I have actually, general knowledge books also played a huge part in my life. I mean, today you have a fantastic series out, Babu. But in those days, I remember there was something called the Children's Britannica.
Yeah.
And I would sit and read it in the afternoon just for fun. And Children's Britannica was there. There was a series called The Book of Knowledge. And books like that, those things set you a foundation. And more than anything else, it just piques your interest in 20 other things which you pick up later. You hear, okay, that's King Richard, And King Richard was once in prison. Then there was a bard out there who used to sing and try and see whether Richard was inside because he'd hear it or not. And stories like that stay with you all your life. And, you get an interest in this. So I think you need enough material around you, whether it's books or Kindles or whatever it is.
And conversation.
Yeah, and conversation to pique your interest and to push you into 100 rabbit holes. And that's how you really learn and enjoy yourself.
I think so, because even for me, the earliest impressions I remember, I don't even remember the name of the encyclopedia. I was also loved reading, and there was a piles of classic English literature which was shaping influences starting very early. But the encyclopedic works also were really the first glimpse of how things work, what lies behind what, whether it's the railway system or whether it is, fundamental scientific principles, or whether world societies, how they're organized, governments, civil society, how it's organized. Those things, the basic ideas, if it's well put early on, they form a fantastic foundation.
Absolutely. And that's what I tell people that, in this day of Google and all, they say, why do you need quizzing? If you to even know what to Google properly, you need to understand, you need to have certain basic foundational knowledge. Otherwise, you can't put things in perspective. And in fact, that's one of the things. When I do shows on ClickBuzz, I ask a question and people actually wait to answer that question literally, because I say it's very tough if you're not above certain level. And the point of it is, why is it tough? It should be easily Googleable. But there's a way of setting it in which if you don't have a basic understanding of the sport and what is around you, you won't even know what to look for.
Absolutely. And I think that foundational knowledge is vital. To go back to your family environment, your father has been an influence. And I think not just in the area of knowledge, but Joy is a very prolific writer on Facebook, particularly, sometimes even on Twitter, on X, I beg your pardon. And over there, he talks a lot, and a number of the instances has about life lessons learned from the father. So you would want to tell us a little bit about him?
No, I mean, he was an amazing man. And as I said, he went through the 46 riots where he was in the middle of the riots and, there were bodies all around. And he went through that. He went through, joined the army, 65 war. He was straight by a saver plane. His driver was shot.
He was in the
Corps of Electrical and Mechanical Engineers.
Okay.
So in the 60s,
He was a sapper.
Not a sapper, sappers are engineers.
Okay.
EME basically looks after the
EME, I beg your pardon.
EME. So he was in charge of pulling out some 4 Centurion tanks which were stuck out somewhere. And the sabers came around and they started. And my father said something to me, the sabers started strafing. And my father said that literally they say that, when you're dying, your life sort of flashes in front of your eyes. I said, it actually happens. In those 15 seconds, he literally saw his childhood, parents, marriage, and
Flashed before your eyes.
Flashed before his eyes, his 2 daughters. I was not born then. And literally that happened. So the interesting thing about it is that with all that, the perspective he got and some of the kind of things he did, again, Babu, you've hit upon something very interesting, which is that always learning. So my mother had Alzheimer's, and you know how Alzheimer's is. It's a wasting disease. You turn around and it kills you. And
as people are aging now and living longer, this is in every other home. My mother had Alzheimer's at the end. Rosa, my wife's mother, also is going through in every other home. there is, some form of either Alzheimer's or senile dementia, and something that we have to live with. And I know your father did a yeoman's job looking after your mother and wrote a book about it as well.
Absolutely. And, just from that book, I remember one of the most important things, that there was a period when my mother has sort of regressed into being a 10, 12-year-old girl, because that's what happens in Alzheimer's. Your last memories go out first, so your earliest memories remain. So one day, my father walks in and sees my mother sitting out there and smiling away, and a nurse dancing in front of her. And he didn't find what was happening. And then that nurse was dancing and talking to her in baby language. And then my father said, I cannot look at my mother anymore as a 65-year-old lady with dementia. Instead, she's a 12-year-old girl. So what he did was, he changed the way the entire house worked. So then it wasn't a house, it wasn't my wife, it's a grandchild. She's a 12-year-old girl. So the nurses and the help would come with they'd tie ribbons in her hair, they'd play with her with toys, they would sing Bengali folk rhymes with her, and she used to be really happy. And that's the amazing part of it, is how do you twist the problem on its head and look at it in a different way? And B is learning for someone who's here. Probably the lady who was there was a wonderful lady. She was uneducated, but she instinctively understood that this is what Ma was a child in a sense. And I think that my father's ability at the age of 75 to be able to still understand, change the way he looked at things and move on is something that I so admire.
That and several other examples you talk about, after he moved on from the army, he took his job in civil life and things like that, and he worked with some very challenging assignments. But the way he dealt with things are things that you've tried to pick up
Absolutely.
things from, applied them as a father. Have you done that? Because you have twins, I know.
I have twins. I have a special needs boy as well, Neil, who's the love of my life. And I think that's the important thing, to take every challenge, take every moment. Uh, my sisters and me are also very close. And we have this motto when we talk, and we talk almost every day. It's WWDD. So whenever we are in trouble, it's WWDD. What would daddy do? So what would my father do under these circumstances? And it's almost like a mantra for us, saying that, okay, this is what drives us. Okay, this is what daddy would have probably thought. So this is the way of going about it. So
You were very blessed for having a father, a parent like that. A mother, of course, who was wonderful, and unfortunately had to deal with a very debilitating condition. But the father, being such a role model, was a big one, and and you were blessed to have that. And I think that is really fantastic. That's one thing that you learn. You learn from your family. Your sisters too teach. I
Absolutely.
believe that your brother-in-law too was in education.
Yeah. My brother-in-law was a Rhodes Scholar who came back and said, he joined a marketing firm, and with, uh, one fine morning he said that, I haven't learned my Oxford education to sell surf and rail. And he went and he decided that, school is a place where he really wanted to teach, because he felt that, you can really make a difference at that level. And I think that is the one thing that he did beautifully. He was not, it's a very interesting thing. If you look at my sister and my brother-in-law, uh, Indrani, my sister, is a perfect teacher. She understands teaching and she makes it into an art. So she has taken me to classes in Lovedale where she's asked me to say, bring World War II from a different perspective. So I bought a perspective where I turned on and said that, you know what? Do you know why all the heroines in the 40s had their hair cut short? And they said, yeah. And I said, take a look. And all the heroines of the 40s American films, Bollywood, Hollywood, had their hair short because the men had gone to war. The women were working in the factories. Long hair would get caught in the machines. So how do you influence women to have short hair? You make sure that their role models have short hair. So she would take anything. And now she's still teaching educators, and sometimes educators who are teaching in villages around. And one of the examples she gives is, she comes and she says that, what is it like? A good lesson, teaching a good lesson to students is like a Bhelpuri. So you have the basic, the
Jalpuri, Bhelpuri,
yeah,
whatever.
Yeah. But then you have to mix some masala, you have to mix some other things, you put them together, you mix it, and they actually understood it. And I remember when, they were discussing lesson plans later, one of the ladies came up to her and said, ye lesson acha hai, lekin thoda khatta chahiye. And that understanding that the lesson is so much more than just giving out facts, but it's putting them together, making it interesting, adding a little spice to the student, making the student interested. That all goes into a lesson. So both my sisters are educators, and I'm so blessed at how they sort of give back to the community every day.
Absolutely. And you know what, her lesson about the Bhelpuri or the Jalmuri, that, and with Muri, Murmura being the basic of it, is something that we've been trying to do with quiz questions. Because they say the key to the right answer is the right question.
Absolutely.
Even now, when you're working with AI, there's this new term called prompt engineering. Put the right prompts and questions and you come up with the best results. And this is very important. So even in a question to be interesting, to be engaging, to go beyond just a small circle of people, which we've had to do because we've done Janta quizzes like Kaun Banega Crorepati and so on and so forth. You have to make so that, you know, your Bhelpuri will be tikha, khatta, meetha, thoda sa kurkura. You have to put also once in a while. And sometimes, of course, they are sort of, you know, they're strong, singular tastes, and, you know, they move up in a particular way. But yes, whether for education in general or whether for something for quizzing, which can intrigue people's imagination, get them involved in certain things. Certainly, incidentally, your brother-in-law that you mentioned, Devri Alairi, he was my senior at St. Stephen's. He was vice president games. And of course, then he went on to Rhodes from then. And I visited both him and your sister, as well as their daughters at Lovedale, where he had a path-breaking role to play at Lovedale. I think he transformed it for a while, introduced sports in a big way, and all sorts of activities. Academically, they did very well. So he was quite a sort of legendary figure in the world of public school education.
Absolutely. I think the biggest thing about him was he had a passion for doing things. So his whole attitude was, if you don't do it well enough, don't do it. If you're doing it, do the best. Wherever Indrani Dev is no longer with us, unfortunately, but wherever my sister goes in the world, there's so many people who talk about, you know, we started running because of that. Or they said we went to the Oxford because of them, because he said that, you know, if you have a passion, go and follow it.
Fantastic. Interesting to hear about family influences and how that made a difference to Joy. The reading habit, the habit of, you know, encouraging knowledge, participation, mind sports, and also life lessons is something that, you know, we just had a sort of close encounter with. And now, one of the many hats that he wears is Director General of the Fantasy Federation Sports of India. Where did it begin? And you're regarded as a pioneer of fantasy sports in one sense. That was Super Selector at ESPN Star Sports.
Absolutely. It was Super Selector at ESPN Star Sports. Actually, the story goes back to 2000, because at that time, ESPN Star Sports, in a conference in programming, they thought that how can we get people to be more interested in non-India cricket? Everyone was watching India cricket. How do you get people to be interested? So we wanted to devise a show. And what is fantasy sport or fantasy cricket? Basically, what you do is you pick a team, you know, for a match, and your players, just the players you pick, they score points for you just as they score runs in the field. So if they score 1 run, they give you 1 point. If they get a wicket, they give you 25 points. If they get a catch, they give you 5 points. So you are actually become a selector yourself. And therefore, even if the game is not an India game, you say, oh, you know, I have picked Sarfraz Khan, he scored runs for me. Oh no, I've got, you know, Matthew Hoggard, and look, he's getting wickets for me. So the interest levels increase a lot. And it was a huge challenge, because unlike, you know, Premier League football, where you had lots of matches where, you know, every team plays the same matches, in a month, you had different teams playing different number of matches, some playing ODIs, some playing, you know, test matches, and somehow mixing and matching them and deciding how you price the players was a huge challenge.
So that was a homegrown format?
It was a completely homegrown
And
format.
you had a big role to play in that?
We designed it. My boss Ray Hume and I designed it.
Ray Hume was the Australian
He was Australian, who was the head of executive
broadcast
producer
Okay, at ESPN Star.
at ESPN
All right.
Star Sports. So we got together, we designed that complete homegrown format, and we made it a television show which it had never been before.
So in a sense, it foreshadowed things like Dream 11 and My 11. You know, there's a whole host of programs in this business of creating these teams.
Absolutely. In fact, Harjain told me one day, very kind of him, he said that he used to play Super Selector, fantasy sport, fantasy cricket out here, went abroad, came back after college, and realized that, you know, it wasn't there anymore because ESPN Star Sports had stopped it. And then he thought there was a market niche, and that's where in Dream 11 he decided to start. So it's very kind of him, but sort of he regards it as Super Selector being the first thing that started the entire fantasy revolution in India. And so now to go back there and to work with all these fantasy uh, outfits is so much fun because
How is it doing that particular field? I mean, what's the
there's
scale
so
of it?
much. It's fascinating. Every place I go to, for example, one of the outcomes of fantasy is very common. IPL auctions. So you have a lot of auctions that happen in colleges around the country. They have mock IPL auctions. That's really fantasy because you're picking and choosing and making choices.
You mean this auctioning thing, people play it as a separate game by themselves?
They play it as a game by themselves. It's a very serious game. There's serious modeling. And now the kind of machine learning, artificial intelligence. So it's not just about, I'll pick this player, I'll pick that. But this is the data, this is the machine learning, these are the algorithms. So a lot of science and the top techies, I mean, you can play it for fun as well, but the top techies in the country play it as a sport, as a mind sport.
Your time with KKR, Kolkata Knight Riders, and recently they won again.
Absolutely.
And one of the things you wrote was about the role of the owner, in this case, Shahrukh Khan. Do you want to give us the essence of that?
No, I mean, Shahrukh was, you see so many teams and, some teams are struggling, Punjab being a case in point, with ownership. And I think what Shahrukh Khan did was epitomized, what owners should be like. He was totally supportive without getting into the nitty-gritties of which players to pick.
Micromanagement.
He
He
absolutely
doesn't get into micromanagement.
And I think he did that very well. And he literally asked that, okay, which player do you think, needs a bit of support? Or I think I'll go and chat with him. So it was all about helping on the side. It was all about supporting the team. And he saw, I mean, that's a great thing that, uh, lots of people have seen lots of wins. He saw defeat before he saw victory. And therefore, the victory also is much sweeter for him. And he also appreciates what it takes to, be a winning team.
And KKR is one of his most successful commercial enterprises.
Hugely, hugely. I mean, the amount of money, and remember one thing, Kolkata Knight Riders was the first team that went profitable because they bought Kolkata, which was
From the very first season.
from the very first season. Second season wasn't because everyone went to South Africa. But his ability, because when an advertiser comes and say buys a sponsorship KKR, they are paying, say, if they're paying X amount of rupees for KKR, they're paying another X amount of rupees for Shahrukh Khan being a part of the ad. And that made a difference. And he was absolutely fantastic. And I'll give you a great example of what a marketing genius he was. In 2008, there was a film, I think, Om Shanti Om. And there was a particular brand, a watch brand that was supposed to appear on that Om Shanti Om. And at the last minute, they didn't have money to do it. Typically what happens, global sanctions don't come through. It's not that they don't have the money, didn't come through on time. Shahrukh put up their ad for free in the film. Okay, and it's a definite ad which you can see. It's a definite placement you can see. Come 2008, when Kolkata Knight Riders comes on, they're the first people to sign up. And having an iconic international watch brand means every other brand around you also feels that, wow, I'm in great company. So Shahrukh that way was so astute, great relationships, great management that where other teams were struggling with getting the finances together, that was something he always made sure that KKR had.
Do you remember your first encounter with Shahrukh? Had you met him before for KKR? And how did it go? What was your personal equation with him like?
So, I want to take you back. Why was I there in KKR? I was there in KKR because I did something called Super Selector in 2001.
Oh, once again,
Yes,
we're back to Super Selector.
because Super Selector is all about selecting teams.
Yeah.
So I figured out before 2008 auction that this is something that every team would need. So it's very interesting. I spoke to 3 teams. One team told me that they'll give me a flat sum of money, take my thing and do whatever they wanted to. The second team told me, get on board. The third team was KKR, where my good friend Jeet Banerjee was there, and Lalit had introduced, I mean, I knew Lalit also because of ESPN Star Sports Days. And he said, KKR could be an interesting journey, so why don't you come? So my first job was to basically design the auction software for KKR in 2008. That's where my journey started. So my first meeting with Shahrukh was in a smoke-filled room, because with Shahrukh, that's a necessity. with
non-stop.
Yes.
Non-stop.
with
Yeah.
Shahrukh Ganguly, myself, all these support staff sitting out there figuring out who can we take for the auction. And then at 1 o'clock, Shahrukh suddenly says, wait, I need to go downstairs. Why? Because Shoaib Akhtar has come to visit him. We had no idea why Shoaib Akhtar visited or didn't visit, but yeah, it was one of those. It was a night I'll never forget in my life, I think it was the 17th or 18th of February.
My God, and that's a great innings. 7 years, you said, and 2 wins during those 7 years. That's fantastic. And then you left. Any particular reason for moving on?
The most important reason was that India had just got the rights to the Under-17 FIFA World Cup.
That's the next subject.
Yeah.
From cricket and KKR and being team director of KKR for 7 years, during which the team won the trophy, the IPL trophy, twice, Joy moved on to football. He's been interested in various things. In between, he's also done programming stints at National Geographic and
History Channel.
History Channel as well. But then on to football, and I believe that World Cup for under-17s, which was held in India and was it neighboring countries as well?
Just India.
Just India was one of the most successful. In what way? Tell us.
In just pure numbers, it's about 1.38 million people came to watch the matches.
Under-17s.
Under-17 matches. It's an unbelievable number of people. And I think what we did very well.
We have teams from all over the world.
We had teams from Brazil. We had England was the eventual champions. In fact, one of the top players in Manchester City today, Phil Foden, was the man of the match of the finals. Did absolutely fantastic there.
This was in 2017.
2017. At least 7 to 10 of these players just in the finals are playing top level international football in Spain, in England, in Poland, all over the place. And the challenge of it was that FIFA, I've done KKR, we've done big events in India. But FIFA does events at a different level altogether.
Globally, in India,
Globally.
football has not been organized at that level.
And the way they organize their sport, so their planning level. So the FIFA document that you get to do a World Cup,
Like a production Bible.
is about 4,500 pages. There are 65 pages. The ball boys and ball girls who sit outside, the ball comes and you throw them in. There's 65 pages only on ball boys, ball girls, where they sit, where they should stand, what kind of place they should be kept in the fridge there, what is the mix of drinks that should be there, how much water, how much juice, how much what else do you need. That's the kind of level of programming and
Granular detail.
But here you come and that's coming to India, which is a country we are big fat wedding country. Sab kuch ho jayega last minute.
Jugaad.
But Jugaad doesn't work with FIFA. So getting those together and marrying them was it was an absolutely amazing journey, because at some point in time we've realized we had so many people, so many stakeholders, we didn't know how to please. Because, there's every government. So suppose we are doing a game in West Bengal. The West Bengal government is in charge of the place. The Minister of Youth Affairs and Sports is sponsoring us. Jawaharlal Nehru Stadium belongs to SAI. There's a Congress government somewhere, there's a CPM government somewhere, there's a government. So each and every state is a new challenge, which has their different ministers, they all have their own agendas. So putting that together.
My God, I wouldn't like to have been in your place. So did your hair grow whiter during that time?
No, but I have to tell you, the best part of all this is we are going to do the semi-finals. There's a semi-final happening in Guwahati, and after that the finals happen in Calcutta. And Guwahati, it starts raining and does not stop. And mind you, we have looked at weather forecasts for the past 35 years before we've scheduled matches. And this just came up. It hasn't happened in 35 years.
Weather gods are, fickle.
So in 36 hours, we had to change location from Guwahati to Kolkata. 36 hours. So FIFA told us, just do it in an empty stadium, because, it's too dangerous to do it. And we said, we'll get lynched if we do it in an empty stadium, given what it is. So how to distribute tickets and make sure that it's fairly given. It was one saga, but we managed to do it. And I remember that day, the game started at, I think, 7 o'clock. And from 6:15, I'm watching the crowds, 15,000 in, 20,000 in, 40,000 in. And we had a full house. And perhaps that's one of the most proudest moments of my life.
Kolkata is also sports crazy. Yeah.
No.
They gather around for chess in the rain under the Godiard Bridge. I've seen a row of people playing chess, and there are people crowded around it. Carom tournaments they get together for. But to pull it off for something like FIFA, okay, I can imagine. Yeah.
36 hours and FIFA, that's the one thing FIFA says they've never seen done. And I said, that's the magic of Bengal and that's the magic of India also. Our ability to be able to do things like that, when it's not just jugaad, is fantastic.
So a satisfying experience.
Oh, absolutely amazing
overall in
experience.
football, and then suddenly moved on to volleyball.
Yeah, it was very interesting because, we were looking at sport and one of the people who worked with me was Baseline, who done a lot of the sponsorship for the World Cup. And they said that, volleyball, would it be of interest to you? So I said, look, let's do one thing. Let's go and see a top level volleyball tournament and see whether it works or not. Because if a sport is not good looking enough on television, it doesn't work. So I went out there, I shot it myself, with a cameraman, and we put it together and we said, no, we can make something out of this. So we did the first season with the federation. It was such a success that for the finals, 3 top officials, including the Secretary General of FIVB, flew in uninvited. Because the one thing, Babu, we never realize is every sporting federation in the world wants India. We are 1.4 billion people, only one game of any note, which is cricket. So everyone thinks this is a great opportunity. It's only we, in our collective incompetence of running sport, cannot give it to them. So after we did it that first year, then the federation got greedy. Not the federation, some people in the federation got greedy. They asked for something, we refused to give it. Our contract was cancelled.
Okay. Just to cue in people, in case you haven't caught on, we are talking about a volleyball league in India, the first ever. It was called Pro Volleyball, I
Pro
believe,
Volleyball and then the Prime Volleyball League.
which you
Restarted
driving now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we restarted it. And the fascinating thing is we got the support not from the local federation because it no longer existed. We won the case against them. We didn't want our rights. We got our support from the international federation. And it's a matter of huge pride that 2 years later, the World Club Championships was held in India under our auspices, and the champion team of the Prime Volleyball League played with the top 6 volleyball teams from around the world, which was something. We bought top level volleyball teams.
Exceptional. Actually, I find volleyball fantastic to watch. I mean, it's so athletic, gymnastic, and the kind of teamwork. It's almost impossible things that people pull out of a hat or anything. It's fantastic. And I hope it goes to place. Where are we? What's the status now?
So it's gone. We've done 3 really good seasons. 4th season coming up, we have some very good owners, the people who own PhonePe, the Muthoot Group, the Sangvi Group, all of them excellent owners. I think it's ready for takeoff. We've reached a certain level in terms of critical mass. I think it's only upwards from here.
I hope so, because so far cricket is the one thing that does well. We've had another of sports leagues, and all of them are fighting for oxygen in that space. In a manner of speaking, in football, you pulled off an under-17 World Cup on a scale never seen anywhere in the world before. But the beautiful game all over the world in India has not really taken off to that extent. Any reason why? What can people do to learn to get their chops in the other sports as well, to enough of a situation where they're pulling in crowds and they're also excelling on the international stage?
Babu, very, very vital question. Why are we not a sporting nation? And I think, people say it's infrastructure. And I tell them, go to Brazil and Argentina. There's no infrastructure. Pele has not learned football. He's learned it in the streets of Rio. So let's not talk about infrastructure. That's not the problem. The problem is specifically passion, and not just passion of the players. It's a passion of the people around you. So if you go and watch a school match in Brazil, the parents will be there, the locality will be there, everyone will be interested. Because how do kids become stars? Because in front of people, they want to play. Every sports person wants to become a star. And I think that is where we are missing out. You go to a school match today, schools don't even allow parents to come and watch. At one time, we used to at least have inter-school matches where the rest of the school was watch. You don't even see that happening nowadays. And I think that's it. If the passion is not there, then you're not going to get it. And if the interest is not there, then what happens is that one game teacher who's deciding A plays or B plays or C plays. And I just think that system is fundamentally flawed at that lowest level.
So socially, at the ground level, and then of course at the organizational level, at the federation level, and the way it all works, all of that needs to align in a certain way for us to, how should I say, for us to become more of a sporting nation and sport to become more a part of our culture.
Exactly.
And not necessarily to win trophies, but just as a life-enhancing activity.
I couldn't agree more. That's the point. That sport has to be there whether you win trophies or don't win trophies. If you just mandate it on, okay, this is the number of trophies I'll win, you will never be a sporting nation.
So, a question that is often asked of me is, why do you need to have general knowledge when you can, just Google or you can use artificial intelligence? What would be your response to that?
My response to that is that unless you have a generalized base of knowledge, that's one, a generalized base of knowledge. B is an understanding of how knowledge works. Because knowledge is a very interesting thing. You cannot, it's not linear. You have to understand how it all fits together. So, if you don't know how to ask the right question, you will not get the right answer. That's
Yes,
all.
because something like Google throws out the most popular search, not necessarily factual one, and it's replete with the kind of misinformation, propaganda, and all kinds of things which is lying there. Even artificial intelligence that gives you a caution: check your facts. Please check your facts. So the reliability of sources and cross-checking becomes important. If you don't have a foundational knowledge, you can never navigate this forest of information.
Exactly. I always give this example that when you're looking at the internet is like, taking a glass of water from the Niagara Falls. There's so much of it falling. You put a glass of water there, you're going to be overwhelmed. How do you get what you want? How do you get exactly what you want? How do you understand that, okay, this is correct? You need to have a certain amount of critical thinking, intelligence, and ability to be able to do it. And even that critical thinking will not work unless you basically understand the subject. So, what you're talking about, foundational knowledge, is key. Without that foundational knowledge, every prompt that you give, you will never know what is the right prompt to give. And I think that is the single biggest problem, which is why we have, unfortunately, WhatsApp University around today, because people will see a fact and they won't check it.
Yeah, they say about specialists. Specialists are people who know a lot about a little. About polymaths, they say they know a lot about a lot. Maybe not nowhere near the kind of depth that a specialist would, but enough to be able to navigate their way, to not only use it, but to also savor various fields of knowledge and interest all around us and all over the world. What would be some of the advice that you give to young people who are in school or elsewhere? How would you encourage their curiosity? What would you advise them to do to A, expand what they know, and also to enjoy it? As a corollary, what would make them good as quizzers, and why quiz at all?
So, firstly, I'll try and go the reverse way. Why quiz at all? Because quiz is a great tool to navigate life, Babu. And if you even see some of the quizzes that we've had, from a Shashi Tharoor to a Jayan Sinha to so many top people, Jairam Ramesh, Rajdeep Sardesai was a quizzer. It gives you, because what quizzing does is it gives you an ability to be able to quickly understand, assimilate facts, assimilate a situation, put things together, and try and find the solution. And quizzers think on their feet, they have that ability, and that's an ability that gets better and better as you go on. Vis-a-vis learning, as I said, pick, all I tell people is that, okay, if you don't want to, you're not interested in 10 things, pick that one thing that you're interested in. Read it, but really go into depth in it. Read a bit and you will find new things opening up for you. And my belief is that if there's any one subject that you enjoy and know really well, you will start enjoying other subjects, because the object of learning, the ability to be able to know something in some depth, gives you an understanding of other fields as well. So I always say that, for me, it was a very strange subject, My subject of choice, which I really went into real depth, was World War II, and specifically the tanks of the Second World War. It was of great interest to me. But as I said, the enjoyment of researching, finding out more, doing things. And as you do that, when you're reading about World War II, other social aspects open up. Oh, there's a book on World War II. Okay, that's interesting. That tells you about factories, that tells you about other things, that tells you about, the revolution in science that happened before that. And everything starts opening up. So just pick one. So it's not even that you need to pick something you don't like. Pick something you like. have fun with it, and you'll see a whole vista and a world will start opening up for you.
From what you tell me, it just reinforces something that I tell everybody all the time, that learning is a discovery and an adventure. And it has its own rewards, it has its own challenges, but also lifelong learning is a key. Finding out how to find out about things is important, and finding out can be fun, it can be very rewarding. That's something that, when people ask me what is it, they think, is there just, any one key that will suddenly open the door and make you knowledgeable about everything? No. Read, watch, listen well, discriminatingly, pick up skepticism, feed your curiosity. And that's the one way that you're going to find out about this, is because it teaches you what you just spoke about on the tanks in the Second World War, about how to find out one thing leads to the other, and your interests expand. And it's interesting in its own way. You learn to make connections. And I think that's vital. Also, of course, on competitive quizzing, being able to recall things when you need to is important. And the more you practice what you said earlier, the better you get at it. As the final bell approaches on Quizzitok, it's time for What's the Buzz, right? Joy, what's hot and happening in your field and in trends you see emerging around?
Oh, well, in our field, I think the most exciting time for Indian sport, we've just put in a formal bid for the 2036 Olympics. And just to be able to put it together, the kind of infrastructure, the kind of things that are required to put it together is fascinating. So there's a lot of work going on. There's one other thing which is very interesting. The Minister of Sport, Youth Affairs and Sports have actually put together a sports bill, which he has very graciously put forward to the general public and said, please put in your comments, your thoughts on how we can make it better. So he wants a consensus around it. And I think it's a great move in the right direction because, we've got a lot to learn in how we do our sport. So this and the Olympics means that for India, sport is, it's right out there. I think it's a very, very important part of what's going to happen in the next 10 years.
And the younger people are doing phenomenally, not only in sport like cricket and chess.
Oh, chess is a revolution.
And they're so impossibly young.
They're impossibly young. What Anand has done, like a Pied Piper, he started playing. And we started with one grandmaster in 87. We have over 80 grandmasters now. And now we are in the top 3, but we are supposed to be dominating the chess world. In the next 5 years, we'll dominate the world of chess.
I know. I was just seeing a clip the other day of somebody in some European place chasing the very shy Pragyananda, sort of in the sense for autographs and this and that. And then they've arrived on the international stage in a big time bully for young people. And we hope too, in the field of quizzing, we'll see excellence of another order and much more widespread sort of, association and participation, whether it's on apps, interactivity, or through contests, or through just things that are happening in the classroom, at the home, at Durga Puja pandals, or clubs, or universities, clubs. We hope a lot of that happens. Joy, it's been quite a conversation. From your groundbreaking work in sports administration to your passion for quizzing, you've shown us the power of curiosity and knowledge.
Babu, you are my quizzing guru. It all started. I started off because, my biggest ambition was to work with Siddhartha Basu. So this is a dream come true.
Thanks so much. But, I approached this whole area. Of course, still knowledge has always been a sort of, interest with me. I've always done it, but I've never been a competitive quizzer. But I came into it more as how should I say, as a conductor, as a communicator, so stagecraft came into it. Fashioning television program and all the rest of it. And you've participated in that. We've done the last thing we did together was Quizzer of the Year, in which you conducted the rounds with great flair and fantastically. But this conversation has been very interesting for me, and I'm sure for people who are listening and watching too. To our viewers and listeners, keep learning, stay curious, and remember that knowledge is a journey, not a destination, not a full stop. Join us next time as we explore the power of knowledge with another guest. Until then, happy reading, happy watching, happy listening, happy quizzing.